Hello, everyone, and welcome to Semantics Conference webinar, Knowledge Graphs, AI, and Semantics. What are the common business problems these tools solve? My name is Madison Juronsky, and I am a member of the Semantics marketing team. Before I hand the mic over to our moderator, Joe Hilger, Semantics Conference Chair, I have a few housekeeping items to cover about this presentation and the GoToWebinar platform. Please note that all participant lines have been muted, but we would still love to hear from you during today's panel. If you have any questions for our speakers, please feel free to send it through the chat tab on the GoToWebinar control panel. If we do not get to your question during today's webinar, we will post answers to all questions in the format of a blog on the Semantics website. Also, today's webinar will be available on demand within 24 hours after the live session. We will send an email with the link following the conclusion of the webinar, as well as post it on the Semantics website. Please feel free to share the link with anyone that you think would be interested. So without any further ado, I am pleased to pass the mic to our moderator and conference chair, Joe Hilger.
Thank you, Madison. I want to start by welcoming everyone to the webinar. We're excited to have you and excited to talk about semantics. For those that don't know me, I'm the COO of Enterprise Knowledge and one of the founders, and I'm also the chair of this semantics conference. So I'm asking questions now. We'll be encouraging this type of talk at the conference as well. So let's get started by introducing each panelist. Andreas, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, good morning, good evening, everybody. My name is Andreas Blumauer. I'm CEO of Semantic Web Company and director of Full Party Software Limited. Yeah, I've been around in this area and community for quite a while. Started out 20 years ago, roughly spoken, and still excited to work on knowledge graph projects and semantic technologies. Now mixed in a lot of machine learning that's even better.
Great. Juan, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Juan Takeda. I am the principal scientist at DataWorld. I joined DataWorld recently through the acquisition of my previous company, Capcenta, which was a company I started based out of our research at the University of Texas at Austin. So I've been working in databases and semantic web knowledge graphs for over a decade.
So this is going to be a long trip for you to get to the conference, isn't it?
Definitely. I'm looking forward to having everybody here in my hometown.
Wonderful. Luli, do you want to go next?
Sure, thanks, Joe. Hi, everyone. My name is Luli Tasfaye. I manage our data information management practice here at Enterprise Knowledge, focusing on the design, implementation, and the scaling of semantic technologies and AI projects for our customers.
Wonderful. Amit, do you want to share your experience as well?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm the director of the Artificial Intelligence Institute at University of South Carolina. I've done 4 companies by licensing my research from universities from where I did my research, and then the technology was licensed to spawn the companies. 3 of them happened to use knowledge graph, including a company that pioneered the first semantic search, similar to what you see in Google's semantic search today, that uses knowledge graph.
Wonderful. So the way we're going to do this is we have a few questions lined up and frankly have enough questions and answers that we can use this entire hour, but we'd actually rather hear from you. So as you're listening, as thoughts come up, please post questions so that I can read yours and start to ask them. But why don't we get started, and let's start with the basics. How does a company know they need a knowledge graph? Andreas, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I would say one of the first signs for that is that your employees are constantly use Google to find other colleagues, probably to find experts inside, or even worse, documents from inside your company. And I don't believe that's the best solution for that. And another quite significant sign would be also that people get constantly lost in translation, so lost in the Babylonian language confusion, cross-departmental, of course, also across the boundaries of your own organization. And of course, it's all about data at the end, and the question always is, okay, do I get the information out of my data silos? Do I have to run from A to B to C to get someone who really helps me with creating reports and all that. So I think it's not the end of the story if we engage a lot of additional data scientists to solve the problem. It should be somehow automatically done in a kind of a self-servicing mode, and we should think towards question answering machines, which really help to bring the data to the people. So that's actually where people should start to think about, okay, where is the solution for that problem or for this really large number of problems? And interestingly, a knowledge graph can build an infrastructure for many of those different aspects of these different applications.
Wonderful. Juan, you're going to take a data perspective component. Compare and contrast. Tell me how you think about this.
So first, you're asking the question is, how does a company know if they need a knowledge graph? So let me go kind of define what is a knowledge graph, because first I think there's a term that gets thrown away a lot, and I don't want to be any pedantic about here, but for me, knowledge graph is just a modern manifestation of data integration. That's it. So if you look at it traditionally, like the status quo of data integration has been kind of focusing on integrating a lot of structured databases. So basically creating your relational database data warehouse and putting stuff in there. That's kind of our traditional way. But I think the modern way of seeing data integration today is it's been just about data, but now it's about data and metadata together. And I think combining data and metadata and having metadata also as a first-class citizen is key. And the second thing that we see a lot now is there's so many different types of data, right? So we have a lot of unstructured data. We have a lot of documents, text, videos. There's semi-structured data. There's JSON, XML, API calls, and there's so much structured data out there. Relational databases, CSV files, and all that stuff. So when we're talking about knowledge graphs, it's a modern way of integrating all those diverse types of data that we have, and also where data and metadata is first-class citizens. So we're really thinking about combining knowledge and data at a large scale. And it happens to be in a graph model. And a graph model, I think, is a really great data model to represent data coming from unstructured and semi-structured. It's a very flexible way. It's a really, and then you can do really cool stuff with graph algorithms and things. So kind of setting that stage up, for me, I think the big value of having a knowledge graph is if you have what I call the data meaning gap, like the conceptualization gap. So you have business users and you have the data owners, the data stewards, and there's this gigantic gap in between, right? You have multiple words being used for the same thing. You have one word that means different things to different people. People don't even know where the data is. When you go ask a business question, you get 3 different answers for the same question, and we all talk about having the single source of truth. You can't even trace the truth of the report that you're getting right now. Right? So if those are the types of problems that you're seeing in your day-to-day, one, and second, you are just in your traditional status quo of creating your data warehouse. Second, I think you need to pay attention and look at knowledge graphs. I think those 2 things are indicators that you need to look into knowledge graphs for your company.
You know, Juan, that's spot on. I can't tell you how many customers have called us and said, I built a data lake and no one can find anything. I don't know what I have. Exactly. It's all in one place, but it's lost. So let's do one more, and let's do this in a fun way so that we all talk. We're going to do a lightning round. Everyone's got 60 seconds. That's going to be tough for this crew. 60 seconds, I'll cut you off. But what is the biggest, most impactful success story that you were involved with or aware of as a result of implementing a knowledge graph? And actually, Lulit, why don't you start?
Yeah, so it's going to be hard in 60 seconds, but I'm going to do my best. So one comes to mind, working with a large engineering research organization. Their big use case was they have very highly tenured employees, so it's hard for them to find who worked on what project and what role they played. And what we started supporting them, the strength that they have is they have a lot of information, both unstructured and structured. A lot of documentation, engineering documentation, and engineering data, and project documentation as well. So we leveraged graph in the form of starting an ontology model, identifying. We started with a small POC with 5 entity types defined, the roles, the people, the location, the project type, and the engineering topic. These were this is what we started with, and we auto-tagged a majority of their documentation just with these and mapped the relationship on their knowledge graph. And what this allowed them to do is now to be able to, with a few clicks, narrow down to the specific person that they're looking for, but also identify what type of engineering topics that they know about, and also to be able to answer in the future as well some questions they would have about supporting the right people, the right projects with the right people. How did I do?
You're right on. Amit, next. Most exciting story you had.
So three of my companies, two I founded and one co-founded, use knowledge graphs. The first one, founded in 1999, used this knowledge graph for world model or ontology for semantic search, a web search that uses knowledge graph in background. The second one does it for healthcare data, electronic medical records, and the third one does it for social media data. My favorite is still the first one, where we have the first patent on this general technology of using knowledge graph for search, browsing, personalization, and advertisement. It's pretty much similar to what you see today in Google search with the info box on the right and search. The technology still survives in the form of vertical market applications like Know Your Customer. So that, for me, that was the most exciting one, still very enduring technology.
Wonderful. Andreas, you got 60 seconds.
The most exciting probably is the one where we help the customer to develop a e-commerce platform further into a kind of a matchmaking platform where the system learns again and again from the behavior, the taste of the user. And by that, it's adding more and more ideas how to configure the perfect, let's say, the perfect event on that platform. So it's also a platform which helps to configure events. And so the interesting part here also was they started out first of all with a machine learning approach only. There was no knowledge graph at all. That was not successful that much, so they did not achieve really good results. And then the second step, they added knowledge graph technologies, and then they achieved really good results. So now it's in combination being used, and it delivers really great matchmaking results.
Awesome. Juan, you're up.
Yeah, for me, it's working with the skeptics, right? So I remember one customer that they had a traditionally enterprise data warehouse, right? The business users are not using it because they didn't trust the data that's in there. So the business users are going directly to the source. And frankly, they've spent millions of dollars and nobody's using it, right? I think they were just kind of open to something new, and they came in saying, all these semantic knowledge graph technologies come in. The real challenge is that there's this IT becomes a bottleneck, right? There's all this friction between business users and IT. All this hidden knowledge is in Excel spreadsheets and Access databases, right? And they're going to say, we're going to go deploy Tableau. How are we going to be successful with deploying Tableau? So they really wanted to have that trusted view of the data. They wanted to have really democratized the data. So what we actually did was kind of almost a bet. We said, we're going to really understand your particular business question. It was like, I think, a daily sales report. And we kind of reversed engineer, understood all the semantics, helped them build an ontology, mapped this to the different data. And they realized that from this one report, there are like 16 different business concepts going on. And they started answering questions that they didn't even know that they could with the data they had. I think down 2 or 3 years later, I think that's like over 100 different concepts, 700 different attributes. I mean, we can't even count now the number of business questions that they're answering. And we've really eliminated that bottleneck and that conceptual gap.
That's awesome. We've got one from the audience. But isn't knowledge more than just about an organization's data? What about knowledge about the business, the processes, the customer interactions? Anyone want to take this one?
The knowledge is anything that your application would need. And for example, in our case, very often the knowledge is about the domain that you are working in. We work, for example, in healthcare related domain. So the relevant knowledge in the healthcare obtained from multiple sources, including clinical experts. When I'm working on mental health, I engage clinical experts who will help me get that knowledge for that domain, as well as knowledge about the individual using the application. So when we build chatbot, again, the knowledge about the patient, that is also relevant. So knowledge can be any of the things that the person asking question said, as well as about the area of work that you want to support, where you want to have more intelligence in understanding the data and in dealing with and working with the data and taking action on the data or information. That's all can be part of the knowledge. The idea is that you're structuring it and making it easier for you to understand the data and understand the interactions with the system.
My suggestion also would be to think a little bit about let's say, a conceptual split between the data graph and the knowledge graph, if that makes sense. So, of course, it's nicely linked together, and that's the beauty of graph technologies when you do queries and all that. But it's two layers really, which can result out of, let's say, data extraction and data ingestion, and then using the additional knowledge models together with the data graph, then can do something great with the data.
So I want to add something. I want to add something else. There's data and then there's knowledge, right? And it's also knowledge about the organization, about processes, about workflows and stuff. So I think you can see it from a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach, right? So a lot of people their problems are focused on data, and I want to go do data integration, and right? So you kind of see it from the data going up. Other people are like, I don't even know what terms we have. Like, we use our terms are in spreadsheets, or we don't even have that, right? So you kind of start, depending on where you want to go, and then you'd understand what are the workflows, who are the people, who are the organizations, who are the people inside the organizations who should be the stewards, who are the owners of this, even at the knowledge layer. And then at some point, you'll say, okay, I built a taxonomy, so what, right? I built an ontology, so what? Well, what business problem is this solving? My experience has been tying all that to data for data integration, right? You can do this for improving search and stuff like that. But I think one step is to think about it. I need to organize my knowledge and what do I have? But think about, what am I going to do with it? And what is the business problem that I'm solving? And I particularly think that an ontology or taxonomy by itself is a nice to have, but you really need to make it executable.
Yeah, Joe, I have a quick example for this one. On a specific project, the use case being, for instance, case routing. So if you are trying to look for the right person in the help desk to assign a specific process. Now this embeds not just the data, but the understanding of the workflows and the processes within the organization. So when you're using, to one's point, once you understand who the people are, what their skill sets are, what they know about, and what kind of cases they are experts in resolving, then you would be able to leverage a graph to apply your use case or whatever business need that you have, workflows, processes, using the data as your bottom line. Joe, you're on mute.
This leads into one of the questions that just came up. It said, for me, knowledge graphs are based on ontologies too, but one problem exists still for quite a long time. To develop a domain-specific ontology by hand may become quite tedious. And we do that all the time. Juan and Lulit, I know you both live that day and night. And you know, how do you deal with that? Like, there isn't a set answer to an ontology. You're really coming in and building one. Lulit, do you want to take that one and run with it, because you do that over and over? And then Ahmed, it sounds like you have some thoughts too.
Yeah, I think it really essentially goes back to my earlier example about starting small, identifying based on the use cases, the current use cases that you have, defining the core entity types. Start there. And then from there, once you have that foundation, you would be able to iteratively grow the graph. I think the beauty of a knowledge graph is it can take a lot more knowledge and a lot more information and map it effectively, as opposed to a relational data scheme, right? So it is really about that foundational understanding your business and being able to map with a small set of the known quantity. And then from there, you may even be able to answer questions that you're not thinking about today.
Awesome. Amit, you were raising your hand. You've built 3 businesses around this stuff, so love to hear your insight on this.
So in my case, the knowledge graphs were usually about the domains and expertise in that domain. As I mentioned, it was web search, it was where you would talk about entertainment, news, politics, sports, all those different subdomains for which you need knowledge, or it was medical and healthcare domain, or it was a domain, generally it was social media, but then you are focusing on a particular sub area. Let's say when I do election related campaign, then I need election related knowledge. If I were to do disaster coordination, I need disaster related knowledge. And in most of the cases, we were able to tap into existing sources. You may start with, for example, getting a subset, filtering a subset of DBpedia, Wikipedia, to get in the original popular domain. If I'm in healthcare domain, I will tap into UMLS, RxNorm, and variety of qualified vocabularies and nomenclatures in that particular domain. If I'm in the finance, there are finance related standards, they have terms that I bring it in. I look at the stock market, what stocks are being traded, I get the symbols. That knowledge I can basically extract from those sources. And then of course, the challenge is when you get data from multiple sources to integrate them cohesively, making the connections, saying that these are synonyms, these are the variety of ways to talk about the same thing, or establishing alignment or relationships. Those becomes the technical challenges that you have to deal with it, including finding the things that you may find, the facts that may be out of date. So one very interesting example was that we had knowledge graph about politics. Hillary Clinton was the first lady, and then the next president came in, and it was Laura Bush that was the first lady. So to deprecate the relationship between Hillary Clinton first lady and make the new relationship between Laura Bush and the first lady, that kind of challenges are somewhat difficult to solve. But this is how we create knowledge graphs.
Great. So I've got one about data quality.
There's something I want to add. Yeah. Sorry, I want to jump in here.
Yeah.
And that's what Lulit said. Start small. My model is always do not boil the ocean. And when we're thinking about, I got to go create this ontology, it's like, no, it's like you don't. This is why these data warehouses traditionally fail, because you think about creating a gigantic enterprise schema that's going to cover everything. You don't even know all the requirements. You may think you know the requirements, but they're not really the true ones until you actually see the data, the usage of it. So start small, but to really start small, put a guardrails is, what is the problem that I'm solving? So let's, at least a lot of that I worked in is like business reporting. Okay, what are the business questions I want to go answer? Let's literally start to go create an ontology to model that particular business question. And that may be so small, and then you iterate and you grow that little by little. I think this is something that we need to make sure that we don't boil the ocean. And then to Amit's point too, is like, if I'm an insurance company, I'm not the only insurance company in the world who's doing this. Obviously, there are other types of existing models or standards that I can go in and look at, reuse, get inspired to do this, right? I mean, the insurances have Accord, finance has FIBO. I mean, in healthcare, there's so many, right? You want to get inspired by all these things and don't reinvent the wheel too. You're on mute again, Joe.
I will. Great. Let's move in a different direction here. What role can knowledge graphs play in making digital transformation successful? So organizations moving from paper-based and old school to much more digital organization. How does knowledge graph fit into that picture? Anyone want to take that one? Andreas, all you.
I mean, digital transformation, of course, is huge. It's a buzzword, not more than that. But I think one thing which is important to see here is how to transform a corporate culture into a culture of sharing, having people in the corporation who are willing to share information, data in general. And I think a knowledge graph program can help not only to link data, but also bring people together. We've seen that frequently in projects that it it's the first time that some database owners start to talk to each other. So they've never met each other probably before. Still, they have information about the same business object. So I think it's a good idea to have them sitting at one table and start to think about, okay, what if we put our data together? Of course, you cannot do it instantly and without any further discussion, but a knowledge graph for me also is a key element of a digital transformation. If you want to transform also your company into a company which is able to really look at the data from a business perspective. So in the center of anything should be the business objects, whenever you create a new data model and anything like that, it should be driven by the idea of having a clear picture on the business object being involved, how they are related to each other, and where do we find information about all these business objects in the repositories we have already, and what kind of questions and what kind of answers do we want to get out of our data silos, call them data lakes, call them data catalogs, whatever it is. At the end of the day, you want to get an answer to your questions. That's the ultimate goal.
Love it. Go ahead, Lily.
Just to support that, I think the key here, especially when it comes to, sounds like the question is more about unstructured content, right? Getting that into a digital form. I think here's where Juan also mentioned this earlier, is where you need metadata. You need to be able to describe your content in a manner that makes sense within your organization. So think in terms of taxonomy and ontology to be able to describe your content so that it is machine understandable or machine readable. That's a huge help in this space.
Absolutely. So I've got one that's fun here, probably a quick one. Who are most typically the knowledge curators? And then it says, please don't say ontologists. Juan.
Okay, so this is I'm really happy to hear this question. And let's think about this analogy on the software engineering side. So right now if you need to go build a software engineering team, we know how to do this very well, right? We know who are the people we need to go hire, what are the roles, we know what the tools are out there. What is the analogous for data? Okay, so what are the tools that we use to go do the data? We talk about data scientists, data stewards, but who, for example, is the product manager for data, right? What are the actual tools? What is the equivalent? In software engineering, we do continuous integration, continuous development. What is the equivalent for that for data? We do this. At the end, we're capturing knowledge and doing ontologies and all these things is to go deliver data so people can go use and consume that data. So I think that the curation here is another way of asking this is who is responsible for your data? And I think who's going to get fired because something went wrong with the data? Who's going to get promoted because the analysis that came out of the data improved the revenue 10x or whatever, right? We're not thinking about this stuff. So I agree, it's not the ontologist. Because when you think about this, we're so in the weeds. So I think we need to think about this at a higher level and say, who is the product manager for data projects, for example? And then when we think about the roles and the actors, we talk about people who are consuming the data consumers, people who are producing the data producers, who's in the middle. And I think the product manager is a person who will connect this stuff, and a lot needs to be learned from history. So in the 90s, we had all this work on knowledge engineering, and I think we need to revisit all this work on knowledge engineering. And I'm calling this the knowledge scientist. And I think you can Google it, you'll see a blog post I have about the knowledge scientist is that role of the person who is responsible for that data, and it's going to lead to this data product manager. So my short answer is not the ontologist. We got to think about this bigger. It's a data product manager. And it's a new role.
I have a very short answer. I have a discussion on this in my LinkedIn article on why does Google or why do Google and Amazon need 10,000 people for their knowledge graph. That is an extensive, I think, coverage of this particular issue.
Love it. Okay, actually, Professor Seth, someone has a question for you. They said, you talked about social media. How can I implement semantic technologies in social media, for example, Twitter? Do you want to take the lead on this?
Yes. So my last company that I founded called Cognovi Labs at the intersection of emotion and AI. Um, when you are dealing with social media, one of the biggest challenge is the noise. So you need to really filter the data, just incorporate those tweets, for example, that you care about. If I'm doing the tweet about, if I'm monitoring, let's say, a hurricane that is just struck the South Carolina, then I don't want all the other data. I want data only on that particular event. And within that also, I maybe only focus on, let's say, data related to rescue and such thing. So the social media platforms would give you typically keyword as a way of um, filtering. I'll give you one very interesting example. We were doing the campaign, meaning the event, for drugs, the prescription drugs and marijuana and other things. And we are interested in, our partners were interested in, our customer interested in spice. Well, when you put the keyword spice, you will get, of course, the spice, which is a name of a street drug, but cooking spice and pumpkin spice latte. In fact, vast majority of results of pumpkin spice latte. So a syntactic solution cannot handle this. You really need a semantic solution. So we built a knowledge graph and the rules around that to say what spice in this context, but not in this context. And then essentially the our intake, that takes that listens to the streaming output from Twitter, was able to throw away all those that were not related to spices in street drug, and that's how we got a good quality search. So this is how the role of knowledge graph is extremely critical if you want to do anything in social media, especially remove the noise. Most companies have lot of technologies that deal with content processing using traditional IR technologies, information retrieval technologies. They, in my view, fails primarily because they are not able to use the semantics to just hone into exactly what you need.
Love it. Andreas, you built a product to deal with this problem, didn't you?
You mean in the area of bringing together graphs?
Yes.
I mean, I could add some information on top of Amit's ideas. I think one nice example is if for instance, you want to use a bit more information from social media to complement a person's profile, let's say in the area of skills management, HR management, and so on. And of course, you can ingest some data from Twitter, from LinkedIn, and so on, and complement maybe internal profiles if you're allowed to that. Always have to think about GDPR, of course. But in any case, it's extremely important to have good quality here, obviously. So otherwise, you would not create good, for instance, matchmaking results. So it brings me back really to make a clear difference between hashtags, for instance, are not concept-based really. They're just terms. They're just could become rather noisy. So what you really have to do always is to refer back to a concept, to a resource in your knowledge graph, to disambiguate, to make clear, okay, what is this message all about? Otherwise, you probably enrich a person's profile with a lot of noise if you use social media data. If you use a knowledge graph and have algorithms implemented which help to disambiguate that, then you get a richer profile of anybody.
Great. So got an interesting one here. Many references to the use of knowledge graphs are in applications with large amounts of data. Can you comment on the value of knowledge graphs in domains that don't have large data lakes? For example, small organizations that want to use something akin to knowledge graphs to capture their processes and link it to their work products.
So I think basically, even for the small organizations, the knowledge graph gives you relationships, the richness of representation, of capturing the activities that your organization needs to do. One of the things that earlier we discussed, one of my panelists discussed, is that it's a richer structure. It's a graph as opposed to, let's say, taxonomy or a tree. And hence, the relationships that you model allows you to capture whatever you want. I don't know exactly what your application use cases is, but relationship is at the heart of semantics. That was a keynote I gave 20 years ago. And the power of the meaning, the way you support any meaning and action is through modeling of those relationships. So capturing the richness of what the organization has to do, even with the small data or short, comes from is supported by this use of richer modeling in the knowledge graph. Another example is also that you might be dealing with smaller data but different modality. Again, dealing with different heterogeneous, different types of data, that knowledge graph can play a very critical role.
Lulit.
No, just an example to add to that. With that relationships, I think the specific use cases could also be search and findability internally of content related to one another, people who are related to each other, or if you're looking to train people on a specific topic or encourage collaboration within the organization. These relationships allow you to find the right people based on interest, based on location, based on expertise level. It streamlines that process. Another process that streamlines or optimizes is also that governance process, to be able to identify what duplicate stuff that you have in your content, small or large, in your data, to be able to understand what you have and to be able to eliminate the stuff that is not relevant, outdated, or duplicated.
And Ted, what Amit said something really important, that semantics and ontology are about the connections. And this is clear, and this is regardless if you have large data, big data, or small data. I mean, you can have tons of spreadsheets, for example, or tons of PDF, whatever, and I just want to be able to connect, saying that this spreadsheet comes from this person, it's about this topic, and this topic has this hierarchy. That already is super valuable to go help search, to help the right person, to see where data is coming from, and we can just do this with a handful, with spreadsheets and PDF documents without thinking about large amounts of data. So again, it's think about the value of making these connections explicit, that you can make use of it and go find and search.
Love it.
Just one additional comment on that. If you have just 2 Excel sheets, spreadsheets, smaller ones probably, and you want to bring them together into one and do analysis over this fused one, what you can do is you can write a Java program which encodes all the rules, how to link the things from the different spreadsheets. You can set up a rule space, or you can use a taxonomy. Probably it's just a small one, and it encodes all the rules already, how to bring things together from the different spreadsheets. And it's not about big data, medium, or small data. It's just a new methodology to build some engine which helps to do data integration and fusion based on entity level. And the beauty of it is you can extend it over time, again and again. You can use the taxonomy and iterate and do again a new version, and you can maintain that much better typically than this code or this program which had all the knowledge encoded how to bring data together. That's, I think, one of the advantages.
Love it. So someone asked a question. They said, and this is a carry on from some of our first things about stewardship or production. So among the knowledge producer, knowledge consumer, and knowledge manager, what role does individuals, example, the patients in healthcare, and let's tackle this one, have to play, especially considering privacy awareness and arising out of laws like GDPR? So what role does that individual have as we think about knowledge graphs as a way to deliver answers to people, particularly in healthcare? Anyone want to jump on that one?
Well, I can jump. I mean, I know Amit has had a lot of healthcare experience, but just we had some at Capcenta. We were doing stuff. One of the great things we were seeing was like we were doing patient stratification. So you want to be able to say, I need to. It's just integrating data, and I want to be able to say I have data about patients in so many different sources, and I want to be able to understand a particular. We were working on LVADs, what's called left ventricular assisted devices, a type of heart pump, and the interesting thing is that how are they identifying patients who were perfect matches for this need for this heart pump? After 6 o'clock, the doctor and the nurse would go pull out charts. And that's how they would go find them, and then they would call them, and it actually unfortunately be too late. And just because we couldn't have the data connected about this, I mean, that's right now the value of what we can do with knowledge graphs. I mean, just being able to connect the data together and having all this type of semantics to help us improve our search. But I mean, I'm sure you
data too. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. Fun one here. Actually, I love this. I think you all want to answer this, but some people think artificial intelligence agents can't leverage knowledge graphs to generalize. What are your thoughts on this?
So I encourage you to search for knowledge-infused learning. And I also gave this keynote a couple of years ago. Knowledge will propel the machine understanding of content. Knowledge will propel machine understanding of content. And there I discuss 4 use cases in detail in terms of the benefit use of knowledge graph gives to the quality of outcomes using natural language processing and machine learning techniques. So there are multiple ways the knowledge graphs inform the other AI techniques and improve the other AI techniques. One of the ways it does it is that it simply gives you better results in whatever you're trying to do. One of my companies, you can look up the company easydI.com. And I'm not selling the company or anything. You can find the white papers and technical papers there, where compared to the best state of the art in natural language processing, use of knowledge graph that is deep in the domain of medical coding, ICD-10 coding, allowed for us to do significant better results to do automatic or semi-automatic coding of the medical records. So that is one thing that knowledge graph provides you. And there's a lot more I can talk about it. Maybe others want to take over. Otherwise, I will be happy to give more information.
Yeah. Lulit, I know you've built these for a few customers. This has to be an easy one for you.
Yeah, I wanted to give a few examples. So I think one use case is to help build a recommendation engine. So using a graph to be able, the project initially with the company we're working with, they built a recommendation engine based on a relational state without a knowledge graph, and that was not performing really well for reasons you can imagine. Whenever the questions change from the input of the customer, you have to write a new schema, right? So based on a knowledge graph, you're able to define, this is a recommendation for courses based on answers you give for exam questions, right? So if you get a question wrong, and this is in the healthcare industry, if you get a question wrong for a nurse certification, then you get a recommendation for recommended courses that you should read to be able to pass the exam. Why a knowledge graph is valuable in this case is that it allows you to grab data from different siloed systems. As you can imagine, the questions are stored in a different database, the user data is stored in a different database, the answers are stored, and the courses are stored in different places. So it allows you to map content in a manner that is ready for the machine to interpret it and to understand based on the context of what's wrong and what's right. Based on the course, and also to be able to make that process efficient in recommending the right course or even the right certification that you should be taking based on your profile and based on what the machine knows about you as an individual.
Great. So next up, is it possible to build NLP, voice and text, to navigate and explore enterprise knowledge graphs? So this is the classic.
Yeah, so it's somewhat related to something we are doing. So we are building domain-specific chatbots, particularly in healthcare domain. So we have one for a pediatric asthma, another for nutrition, and it's used in specific medical conditions. Yet another for mental health. And so what happens is that the knowledge graph plays multiple roles. It is used to capture interaction with the patient. So we have one form of knowledge graph called personalized knowledge graph, where it basically understands each of the patient's health conditions over the period of time, so that it knows what the context when next time the patient interacts with the chatbot. The other issue is that it also helps you formulate the question, formulate the answer, and better understand the question that the user asks. So in all of these cases, essentially you're traversing the knowledge graph to better formulate your NLP or to better interpret your NLP. I hope I answered the question.
Just to say, I've seen a lot of demos, and it's really, really cool demos of just talking to Alexa or whatever through the API, and then you end up writing a federated Sparkle query that goes off and brings data together. It's really cool. I've seen this live many times. So the short answer, yes, it can definitely be done, that you can go Alexa type stuff and it will go generate a query, go do that.
And
I've seen it.
Isn't Alexa based on a knowledge graph? Right. So that's where we're starting with, right? Those are how those tools are doing it. Great. Let me look.
One comment on that. I think it also refers even back to the question before. My observation is, when guys start to build chatbots, the expectation is always really high that they get very quickly to the point where it works very nicely. And of course, the input frequently is a lot of text. If you think about maybe technical documentation and you want to build kind of a assistant on top of that for, let's say, the service people or for the end users, maybe you have a little bit more of a structured input, but still it's quite noisy. And here the really this cold start problem comes in. This, how can we get this chatbot started that we can start to collect input again from the people, and then the system can start to learn. And to get to that point, I think knowledge graphs or even little taxonomies are already quite helpful. But you can imagine, if you just throw in a lot of unstructured stuff, it does not learn as quickly as you add some additional, more structured semantic information on top. So it's yet another technique. Either you encode it in the chatbot framework and put there a lot of rules, which questions should end up to which answers, or you put it into the knowledge graph. It's just another way to do it. And the question always is, what does scale? What scales better? Where can I reuse the stuff? And typically knowledge graphs you can reuse again and again, also for other applications.
So I just heard from somebody I know at Amazon. I won't reveal who that is, but he basically said, Dr. Seth, he moved there last year. I don't know of any project that does not use knowledge graph. And he works with Alexa.
Absolutely. Great. So here's one. I'm a business professional and would like to know, for interactive and in-time decision making, what are the common user interfaces that companies use to present dashboards, results of analysis, and what are the challenges connecting the UI with the backend from a knowledge graph? So how do we start to present for companies that are using it for decision making, decision support? How do we present that information that's in our knowledge graph or wedded together by our knowledge graph from a lot of different sources? Any takers?
So if the person asking the question is more interested, he can look up our work on asthma patients. We have a knowledge graph, and we collect a lot of data about the patients. And there is a dashboard that allows the physicians to understand what are the conditions, for example, symptoms that the patient has observed, potentially what are the correlations with a variety of things we measure, like PM 2.5, air quality, and so on and so forth. And the main thing that I can say here is that if you don't have a knowledge graph, it becomes very hard for you to come up with the concrete data science aspects of what you want to display on your knowledge graph, on your dashboard. With the knowledge graph, you're going to be able to precisely specify the query that shows in this particular window of the dashboard, that window of the dashboard, and shows the graph or pie chart or whatever you're doing. Formulation of exactly what you're going to display becomes much easier because of the knowledge graph as an intermediary, which allows you to pose the exact question that you want to study and visualize through the dashboard.
Yeah, so I completely agree with Amit on this one, right? I think, and you said something key, which was the knowledge graph is kind of that in the intermediate kind of representation. And I think this is one of the fallacies, is that if people think that, oh, we're thinking about a graph, that means that now I need to go and visualize the graph, and I need to go adopt all my data to be a graph. And no, we will never take away spreadsheets and tabular views of people. People will always want to view their data in tables. Tableau, SQL will never go away and do this stuff. So that's a clear message I want people to take away. So a lot of the stuff that we go do is, the graph is kind of that intermediate way to represent data, and I can represent my schema in a graph. People can understand that ontology, but at the end, people say, just give me my tabular view of this stuff. So I will probably create a tabular view, which ends up being a query over a graph that returns the tabular view of orders, of order lines, of customers, and then imagine that with that we start kind of providing that tabular view in Tableau or Power BI, whatever you want. But even in kind of that ideal relational database schema that's in your database textbook that of order systems that never happens in the real world, right? There's never a table called order, a table called customer. But you can then, once you understand that data, you can now create that tabular view and provide that to your Tableaus of the world. So bottom line is, the graph is kind of the intermediate way of connecting things. You may want to have some graph visualization of stuff. I'm skeptical about a lot of these things, but at the end, tables are not going to go away, and you're going to just provide a tabular view that's going to connect to your Tableau.
Love it. Okay, one more question, and then for those whose questions I didn't get to, we'll send out a post with their answers. But really, for everyone here, now they've heard about knowledge graphs. You've heard how great these are. How do I get started? Give me, again, let's do a speed round, 60 seconds. Tell me how I get started. What's the best way to go? Luli, you're up first.
Yeah, I think right on the beginning I alluded to this. Really start small, and Juan agreed with me. I really agree with the do not boil the ocean concept. You have to start with one use case. If you're looking to answer one question, start with that. If you're looking to understand what who worked on what project, start with that question, and then start mapping the specific entities and the graph capabilities that you need around that, and engage your stakeholders just like you would go about any design process, development process. And agility is the key here, so that you are able to rapidly prototype, learn, and then iterate through the process. And then you would be able to grow the graph as you learn from previous iterations.
Next up, Amit, 60 seconds.
So Juan had mentioned earlier, there is a field of knowledge engineering, and how do you elicit knowledge? There is a lot more that is available in literature and in experiences. But fundamentally, in addition to what Lulit said, you design a schema that captures all the entities and relationships that you want to model. You identify all the sources of knowledge that you are going to use to populate this schema, and have the instance facts that you're going to collect to the description base. And then you have the curators available so that they can verify that, along with the test cases and data on which you test that you're able to do that. And then after that, you have to have your extraction algorithms, your algorithms that go across the knowledge graph, your visualization, all of those things you will, have to bring together to build the whole system.
Great. Andreas, you're up. 60 seconds.
I think like always, you should start with the question why. Yeah, it's why do I need a knowledge graph? And by that, you're going to involve different stakeholders. I think it's good to have a clear plan then for the technical people, but knowledge graphing is by far not only a technical project. It's really more than that. And so I think everybody should be clear. So why would we need that? Why is it important? And from there, you can develop, of course, different applications. And I don't think you should start too small, by the way, because if you just pick out one little use case, you probably end up with a quite traditional approach once again. So I think you should also have a clear vision, a bigger picture in mind. So into which direction do you want to develop your knowledge graph towards? What should be in place in 2-3 years time? Of course, you have to do little steps first of all, because it's really the bottleneck are the skills. Typically, you need to introduce new roles. Juan already mentioned one. And that's the bottleneck. Technologies are out there, that's not the problem. I think also the methodologies are clear in the meantime. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are recipes that work. Already we have done hundreds of such projects, so you don't have to make yet another experiment. And therefore, I think the first question really is, why do we need a knowledge graph? And everybody should be clear about that.
Juan, you're up. 60 seconds.
We need to define what success looks like, right? Have a metric for success. I believe that success looks like I'm able to answer business questions. And I want to, what I tell people is make a list of business questions I want to go answer. And you prioritize them by kind of two things. One, questions that you can answer today that you don't trust, or questions that you can answer today that you can't, that they're just too slow. It takes a week to go get an answer for this, right? And so that's your business pain point. That's one thing. Second is, there is this whole technology fallacy that we think that business challenges are caused by technology, so that means that they should be solved by technology. No, it's not just technology. And I think there's three parts: the people, the processes, and the tools, the tech. On the people side, we need to understand who's involved. And this is kind of this data product manager, this knowledge scientist. On the processes, we need to have methodologies. We don't need to go, we can't boil the ocean. When we develop software, we have methodologies to go develop software. We need to have those same methodologies in place for doing data and creating knowledge graphs. And on the tools, I think if you're looking out for tools, look for tools which take into account, one, people, and take into account processes. So you have a process developed with the tools. And in this day of era where everything's on the cloud and we take Google Docs for granted, we want to have tools that are collaborative. And that's something I really want people to think about and be critical about it when you're looking at tools.
Wonderful. So we're running out of time. Juan, Lulit, Amit, and Andreas, thank you for giving your time and really your great thoughts here. For those that are thinking about the Semantics Conference, we'd love to see you there in Austin this April. These are the people that'll be here. These are the conversations we're going to be having. And we're excited to help just grow the knowledge in this space. And if you attended this or are listening to this webinar after the fact, there's a discount code at the bottom of the screen that expires on February 22nd. Sign up with a discount. We'd love to see you there, and I'm excited to get together with this group and everyone else coming so that we can talk more about knowledge graphs, semantics, AI, and machine learning. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you.
Bye.